Welcome to another episode of Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al. We're all about keeping you up to date with timely and relevant information. And today, we're kicking off something new. Joining us for the first time is Morgan Davies, a livestock agent with Elders Bensdale, who will be coming in once a month to give us market updates for cattle and sheep. He's got his boots on the ground talking to buyers and sellers every day, so he will bring us real insights to what's moving, what's not, and where the markets could be heading. Morgan has just spent the last 3 days in the high country calf sales, one of the major sales on the calendar, and he's here to break down how it all went, what the prices were doing, who was buying, and what it might mean for producers going forward. So, let's dive in. So, welcome Morgs to Digging Deeper.
Thanks for having me, Al. Excited to be on.
Very good, and big appreciation because you have just spent the last couple of days up at the high country calf sale, so bit bleary-eyed, but really appreciate you coming down so soon after it.
No worries, really happy to be here.
Now, we won't actually start there. We're just going to get to know you a little bit. So, who are you? Where are you from originally?
Yeah, Morgan Davies. I'm the livestock manager for sort of Gippsland in the northeast, sort of rolling up to Yea, and I've been doing that role for a couple of years, and I've been based out of Elders Bensdale since sort of the back end of 2006. So a career stock agent. I've only ever had one job.
One job. So how old were you when you got in the game?
Just sort of freshly 18. I handed out 2 resumes and one to SEJ and company and one to Elders. So Elders rang me back and said, yep, you can start as a trainee on Monday. But funny story, yesterday, after 20 years, the SEJ owner, Billy Sweeney, gave me my resume back and said, probably stuff that up. The job's still there if you want it. Yeah. So I got my resume back.
Tempted?
Yeah. Not really. No, not on the trainee wage.
Yeah. No. Oh, very good. Now, you're a foster boy?
Foster boy, born and bred.
Yeah. You grew up on property?
Grew up farming family. My father was a big industry meat man. My family had been meat people for a long, long time. They ran Prom Meats and they built that up into a significant business. During the late 90s, got pretty tough, and there was a bit of a family dust up and a split up, and in the end, Dad got out of that, and not long after the plant sort of went broke, went bankrupt. So there was some a fair bit of heartburn in the late 90s for my family. But farming for generations. A great-grandfather moved here in the early 1900s and fought in World War I, cleared country and moved to Foster where he thought the best rainfall was. And family been there. They've bought country in the Western District and things like that. In the latter years, the family sort of split up into a few different paths. And my mum and dad have just, they've got their country and my uncle's got his country and everyone's rolling along pretty happy. So it's good.
Yep. Now, in years gone by, you've bought lambs off me for your dad's butcher shop, and they probably weren't where they should have been, but you've looked after me. So your dad's no longer in that industry anymore?
No, Dad's out. Dad's quit sort of 2 or 3 years ago for health reasons. He was, so he's just enjoying his semi-retirement on his farm, and I haven't seen him much happier. It's fantastic. Look, my old man and my mum too, 6 kids, 2 are adopted. We've had had some pretty exciting childhood. There's lots of us, but living on the country and living in a farm was probably one of the best ways to be brought up, especially in Foster. It's such a great town.
Yeah. Now, 18-year-old, you got your first job. Did you have to move for that gig?
Yeah, so I started off a couple of months. I was in Carramborough, just learning the ropes, and then they packed me up and sent me to Swan Hill.
Yeah, right.
Which I'd never really been to Swan Hill, and they said to me, you'll be up drafting merino lambs. And I said, what the hell's a merino? Lived up in Swan Hill for nearly 12 months. And then I went to Albury for about 16 or 18 months. And then luckily enough, a job came up to come down here as just a junior livestock person for Elders. And the livestock manager left about 6 months later, or 8 months later. So, I was left holding the baby. So there was no one else applied for the job, so I got the livestock manager's job at 20 and a bit, 21. So,
and haven't looked back.
Oh, well, I do look back, but I thoroughly enjoy where we're at now. But there's been some trying times, don't worry.
Yeah. Now you're fully entrenched in Bendigo. You married a local girl.
Yeah.
Play for the local footy team as well.
Yeah, the same story. Yeah, met Jess not long after moving here, and yeah, just moved on, grown up, and had kids, and lived in the area, and yeah, I love East Gippsland, and wouldn't go anywhere else now.
Yeah. Now I might be privy to this, but my wife used to work with your wife, and at some stage you actually were auctioneer of the year. Is that right?
I competed once in the Young Auctioneers competition in the Victoria, won that, and then I went into the National Auctioneers competition and came second.
Yeah.
So, look, the auctioneering competitions are probably the only big thing that the Australian Stock Agents, well, ALPA, Australian Livestock and Property Agents of Australia, do. They run these massive events, and yeah, it was great to be involved in. Went in it once and went okay, but yeah, would have been good to take home the chocolates and get a trip to Canada, which the winner gets to do. But yeah, sadly enough, I missed out. But the bloke that beat me, he was pretty good.
Yeah, right. Oh, no harm as long as you performed all right. So
yeah, I was okay.
Yeah, no, very good. Now let's get up to the Elders High Country Calf Sale. It's just been on. For people that don't know, it's sailing over 2 days, but you're up there for 3 days drafting cattle on the Monday. Just give us a quick recap of how it went this year, 2025.
Yeah, the mountain sale, so it runs over a format of obviously Nutri and East Gippsland. They have their sale first, 10 o'clock on the Tuesday, and then we roll into the Omeo Black Sale where we had plus 3,000 cattle. The Black Sale was strong, really, really strong. A lot of little light spring drop calves, 200 to 250 kilos, making $5. $1,000 to $1,200 and something for a little light black steer. I think it's pretty significant money on what we've seen in the past 12 months. A lot of those bigger calves with a bit of weight, most of them were making sort of $1,200 to $1,500 really, if they had a bit of weight and a bit of quality. There wasn't a lot of weight in those cattle, like up on top in Omeo and Banana. It's been pretty dry out there, and Walgomerang and Black Mountain, those sorts of places have been pretty dry. So the cattle probably not as heavy as they have been in the past. But all in all, a really, really good result on the steers. The heifers, yeah, sold pretty well too. There were some bigger, older, growier heifers there making $1,300 to $1,500, and good sized with a bit of loin on them. Black heifers, 300 and something kilo, making $3 to $3.50 really. So significantly dearer than what we expected, and a really positive result. But that's commonplace with a lot of the mountain calf sales. They are very, very competitive on market rates. But that's because the cattle are so good.
Yep. Now, you said it's dry up there. Were there more heifers than expected?
Yeah, it was funny actually, a funny sale. The Omeo Blacks, we'll stay on that just for a second, but Omeo Blacks, there was more heifers than steers, which you hadn't seen before. So that says that people are just, dumping cattle and selling. Yeah. A couple of big feature lines of heifers. So, yeah, it was pretty, usually there's a lot more steers than heifers.
Yeah. So then that was a Tuesday.
Yeah,
morning.
Then Banambra in the 3 o'clock.
Yeah, there's just red up there.
Just red cattle out there. There's about 1,400 or 1,500 cattle out there. Sold pretty well. A lot of steers probably did start to struggle, but he's getting dry. A lot of cattle sort of battling away, but most of the steers, if you put a blanket on them, $4 for a steer, and the heifer's about $3. So yeah, all in all, it was a good result. Red cattle, the cattle out there, there's some pretty famous last names out there, and people come out to buy those cattle every year. And that's the thing about the Hereford cattle, especially in the mountains. Everyone comes to buy them. If you're a Hereford buyer, you'll be there in the mountains to buy them.
Yep, so let's just pick that apart a little bit. Who comes to these sales to buy?
Yeah, it's funny, like there's a staple of buyers that come every year. There's the odd fly-by-nighter that comes and goes, but your Graham Osborne of the world, Jamie Quinlan, Stephen Bolton bought a fair few cattle this year. There's this, but he's, family are from Walgomerang and things like that, so he knows the cattle inside out, and strongly support the sales every year. And there is these return buyers that come every year to buy feature runs of cattle. Arthur Angus has bought Barry Newcomen or Evan Newcomen's calves for probably, 30, 40 years, I don't know. Long before I got here, and that's 20 years. So every year he's buying the tops. So, it's steeped in tradition, and we're very, very proud of that. And a lot of people come to the calf sales because it's the calf sales, and they'll be coming every year. And a lot of people are coming for the first time. So, as long as we keep that flow and effect going, it'll stay strong.
Yeah, never seen such a little airport in Banambra filled up with so many expensive planes.
Yeah.
They're flying down from Queensland and places like that, are they?
Look, there has been in the past a few people fly in. We've seen helicopters, we've seen a fair bit, but probably as there's been less momentum in the cattle drive over the past 12 or 18 months, we probably haven't seen those real highfalutin guys come in. Pat Cleary from Elders at Mossvale, he comes every year. I think he flies in. Yeah. So I think he enjoys the flight, and he comes and buys 300 or 400 calves, so it's well worth it, and we chauffeur him around, don't worry about that.
Yeah, very good. Now, that was Tuesday sales, Wednesday morning.
Yeah, Wednesday morning, 10 o'clock at Ensay. There was 11 or 1,200 cattle there at Ensay. Those cattle there...
They're mixed, aren't they, down there?
Yeah, no, they're all Herefords.
Oh, right.
Yep, and Hereford short on cross. Yeah, those calves look tremendous. A lot of weight. And they've had a pretty good season in that little pocket, like that rain that splashes around that Bensdale scene and Tambo Crossing scene, and Buchan has seen, was also at Ensay, and they got considerable feed. All those calves look really, really well and all weaned and extremely quiet, and I think that was probably nearly the highlight of the yarding, those calves, and they sold particularly well, $4 to $4.50 or $60. We saw some pretty big deal. I think $1,650 for a pen of roan steers of Evan Newcomen's that Jamie Quinlan bought. Yeah, they look really well.
Yeah. Very good. So you mentioned weight and dollars per head. Was there, if you had weight on them, you reckon that they were the things that making money, or the lighter ones doing all right as well?
That's been the trend. That's been the trend for the past 6 months. But we did see these little light cattle at 200 kilos making $5. And
is that someone speculating?
Yeah, that's people putting numbers of little cattle with the right genetics back in the paddock because they think they're going to grow into money. Sometimes when it does get dry across the vast amount, those little cattle, a lot of them fit on a truck, and a lot of them don't eat a lot.
Yeah.
So they'll eat as much as a crossbred Jew. So they'll, maybe less, but they'll just put them out and give them supplementary feed until the season goes with them. So that was probably the trend we saw, and those little black cattle, that's as dear as I've seen them for 2 or 3 years, really. It was significant, and that was a highlight, which usually it's the Herefords that sell extremely well, and no doubt they did, but those little light black cattle was extreme.
Yeah. So what about some feature lines? Is there any feature lines there's ribbons handed out up there each year?
Yeah.
Do you remember a few of them?
Yeah, the Hereford Society, they put a ribbon out. I don't know who won Benambra. Tony Prendergast won it Ensay, and I think at Omeo it's Peter Faithful usually wins it, but there's also the RCM family. The calves are very, very good. Simon and Sonia Lawlers, all the Newcomens, all those big, heavy Hereford calves are all very popular and very sought after. And there's so many other vendors that don't get mentioned, like Black Mountain Station and sell all those little black steers, and Frank Bolton sells a big run of these growy heifers that feedlotters seem to really go after. So
yeah, were Tamcal up there again?
No, they didn't have any of this year.
They've seen some pretty big prices in the past. I've seen some. So, so you mentioned some of the buyers up there. Do you think many of the cattle are going to go back locally, or are they all getting off the mountain?
No, a few of the Orboss guys came and bought a few. Murray Ingram from Bonaccord bought a few. There's a few cattle, probably not much local competition as we have seen, but there's always a local or two there, just having a look and speculating.
There's often a big gallery anyway, isn't there? So
there's a lot of people there, but there's a lot of cattle to sell too.
Yeah.
So you've always got a chance. But
what was the end draw, do you know?
Yeah, I think between the two sales, it was a bit over 8.5 or something.
Yeah. No, it's good numbers. Now let's move a little bit to actually preparing cattle. So you go see these cattle throughout the year, and you're going to have an idea before they even get there, sort of what condition, what they're going to be like. What are your tips leading up to a big sale like this for a vendor?
We've got to make it easy for the buyer to buy them. Like having unweaned calves, non-dehorned and all that. I understand people and their management systems change, vary, and the pressure that can be apply on their farming program if they do or don't wean. But I'm a firm believer in weaning them. If someone buys the calves and they tip them off the truck and the cattle are honking and bellowing and running around, and the buyer has a bad experience or something goes wrong, well, they're probably not going to go and buy those cattle again. So we've got to make it as easy as we can for a buyer to buy those calves. And if they buy them and they're quiet and they're weaned and they run up to you and they're happy and they'll drink and they sit down and have a sleep and they don't get pink eye or they don't get this or that or that, I think it's a good experience for the buyer. They'll remember the name and they'll go and buy them again if the cattle perform. So
you're looking for those repeat buyers year in, year out.
If you can bank a few of them,
yeah,
that is gold. That is money in the bank. And it is a good business decision to foster that best you can.
Yeah. So is it mainly just that yard weaning or something leading up to the sale? Is that the key?
Yeah, there's different methods to weaning. I think the best ones, look at it 5 or 6 weeks out, have a fresh paddock, let the calf, my opinion, wean them out on good feed or silage and let them get out into open grass as quick as you can, minimising the damage to any eyes, and then consistent feeding from there. The calf should know what a bale of silage is or something like that before he leaves mum, and then after that, it's up to them. The cattle eat, half as much, the cow and the calf when they're off each other than what they do when they're on together. So I think it's a good business decision commercially as well.
Yep. So putting a bit of grain and silage into them, just so you're training onto it.
Yeah, particularly not necessarily. I'll make it a grain-free pellet if you're, a grain-free operator. But yeah, just silage and it's always pretty easy when there's clover in the paddock too. But not all circumstances allow that. So yeah, if you've got a bit of feed, get the calves out, open, minimal bit of distance from each other that they can get away and get a good drink of water, and I think it bodes well.
Yeah. Nice little segue there. You mentioned about the Greenham's Never Ever, or grain free. Buyers looking for certain programs these days?
Yeah, there are. There's various programs. Never Ever has done a fantastic job, the Greenham's company, of promoting their program, and they've probably made everyone else stand up and watch on how they do that. Never Ever cattle sell particularly well, but there's also, your Coles Greys, there's JBS FA, there's TFI have a grass-fed program, there's Cargill's, everyone has one, all right? So it's not a new thing. I think Never Ever have been the best at promoting it.
Yeah.
So all those grass programs suit, and if you can make it easy for those people that buy your calves to fit into any program, as I said, it's money in the bank.
Yeah. What about the EU? Are they still going, are they? I know there's a big program up at the cattle sales for it, but
yeah, EU, you were the EU man.
Yeah, I was one year. There again.
Yeah. Al's job being EU is obviously getting the EU cards up and following through the EU cattle to make it easy for us to police that. It's a big program, and that comes and goes. Sometimes it's worth $100 a head. Other times it's worth nothing. Probably this year there's nothing really kept in the EU system. I think that's because of what's happening globally more than here. Who's buying the beef and the change of Brexit and everything else. EU probably hasn't been as valid as it has been in the past. Having said that, there's still EU feedlot programs going on. We're selling, a few EU cattle in the next couple of weeks. And those cattle are bought because they're EU. So there is value there. Just got to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when things are tight, they're the first things to drop off sometimes, aren't they? So
yeah, exactly. Like they just, EU comes and goes. So if at the moment it's probably not as important, but there are companies still running around buying EU and buying specific runs of cattle that are EU. So it is important.
Very good. So based on what you saw up there and just your travels around the state, buying and selling, what's the cattle market going to do? We're going to have a bit of a speculation here. Prediction time.
Okay, what's the weather going to do? Is it going to rain?
Yeah.
I think we're on a knife's edge. If it doesn't rain and stays tight, I think there's going to be a lot of cattle push on because people are fighting the fight, holding cattle through, and it's all looking good if it rains. If it doesn't rain, little cattle are going to stay tight and might probably get cheaper. And kill cattle and things like that will get dearer. We'll see a massive contrast between fat stock and store stock. Not just yet because there's a few cattle pushing onto the market. There's a surplus of cows at the moment this week. The cow dropped 30 to 50 cents. That's all just numbers, all at the wrong time. Kill and program cattle and lock-in cattle and contract fed cattle and all that sort of stuff will stay good.
Yeah.
Because that's what they want. They want a finished product. All these meat companies and things like that aren't necessarily feeding cattle for their own buying the cattle and feeding them themselves. They're getting cattle contract fed. And so that means someone's buying those cattle, taking the risk, paying the feeding costs all the way through and locking into a contract at the start, which is a new model, not a new model, but a model that is a lot of people are starting to get behind a bit.
Yes, in the past, the processors would do that themselves.
A lot of them would do themselves, or the feedlots would do that themselves. Now, a lot of the feedlots are allowing space for other people to feed their cattle there, just because of the sheer cost of it. Like,
so is that an option for us locals with smaller numbers, or is there a middleman somewhere in there?
It's always good to have a middleman.
Yeah.
No, I think there's, you'd have to cost it out. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
Like, you might be better off just buying bins and feeding yourself on your own place and controlling the narrative. If you want scale, you can feed them elsewhere, and people do in the area. But it's not perfect, and it's expensive, and it does take a lot out of the bank account. So you have to be very aware of what you're doing.
Yep, the margins are quite tight, aren't they?
As skinny as it gets, yeah. It's still skinny, but it's if you can make them numbers work, it's all good.
Yep. So up at the mountain, what was the sentiment amongst producers? They buoyant from the sale?
Yeah, I think they were. Well,
still grumpy old farmers.
No, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. I think they're all pretty positive. Like, some of them, it takes a while to soak it up. More than anything, the sentiment from every calf sale is we're happy to have them gone, and they look forward to when they get paid. Not many. There was no cattle passed in or taken home because it wasn't enough money. Everyone was happy, I think, with the price, but they're more relieved it was just better than last year. A lot of those cockies, it's their annual check. There's not a lot else they get after that. Might sell a few cows or a few late cattle or something like that, but it's a significant part of their business, and we take that very, very seriously.
Yeah. No, it's good to hear. I missed it this year, but I always loved going up there. One of my favourite highlights each year is talking about how many cattle escapes up the middle of Omeo. Any cattle got out this year?
It was, in that sense, a few of the boys that come and help. We have a lot of staff that come and help, and they love it. Like, I hate it when something goes wrong, but they actually quite enjoy it. But no cattle running down the main street. There was the odd leaky trough, or cattle jumped in the trough and made a fair bit of mess. There was no downpours of rain or fires or hailstorms or locusts.
No lightning with truckies hiding under their trucks.
No lightning hitting trees just above the sale yards. No one laying in the mud trying to get out of, One year someone got to the NSA yards, and Jeff Adams and I were running around pulling cattle out of mud in our jocks. Like, there's been some pretty horrific circumstances, but no, this year was pretty boring.
Yeah. Oh, that's disappointing to hear, but good for you guys. I did actually see a photo jump on Elder's website. There's a pretty spectacular sunset photo there with some trucks, actually. Was that from this year?
Oh, there's some fantastic photography that happens there. Like, a lot of people that are artistically minded that go there, they get some fantastic photos, like Zoe Phillips from the Weekly Times. She does a great job, and various others. There's an Elder's HR girl, Claire Mackay, she follows us around with drones, and they take a lot of photos. I don't ever really think about it at the time, but it is great that they sort of recap that stuff, and there's some stories there and photos that will get passed on for generations, really.
It's a good couple of days. If you haven't been, make sure you make the trip up next year. It's a spectacle, and it's well worth a drive up there. Before we go into our signature question, sheep job. We haven't actually talked about that at all. Where are we sitting, and what are we looking like for the next couple of months?
Yeah, the meat job, it again has just been forced with numbers. I think that was pretty evident. Everyone there's a lot of lambs that are coming through the system. There's a lot of $7.50 to $8 for a lamb at the moment, a good supermarket trade lamb. The lambs, as they get heavier dead, they're worth more. So I think those heavy end lambs are pretty valuable at the moment, and that's trending there. So a lot of people are shoveling a lot of grain in their lambs, I know, but there are lambs making $270 to $300 if they've got a heap of weight. But those lambs are 35 dead and things like that, so they're massive.
So what's our domestic sort of kill, like 22 to 26 or something?
Well, 20 to 30 really.
Yeah.
20 to 30. Yeah, you can drop it down a bit, but 20 to 30 is basically every lamb should be.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty safe bet to stay there. If you're on the bottom end of it, it's a store lamb. And the store lambs are getting heavier too. Like, they are wanting more heavy store lambs, so they don't have to feed them as long to get their big money out of them. But they still have to shovel $70 or $80 worth of grain down a lamb's neck before they can get it back. So you do have to be cost effective. Most of those lambs mid-7s to 8s. I think that might float around there for a little bit. If it rains, people will be able to get a bit of control back of the scenario and sit on lambs. But I really don't think a lot's going to change until it rains. There's going to be a lot of stock there just forced onto the market if it doesn't. Like, we're pretty good here. It's dire in the Western District. South Gippsland's dry. I drove through there this morning. South Gippsland's properly dry. And surface water's starting to become a bit of an issue. Those bigger dairies and things like that, like they're starting to rub their neck, think like we might have to dump cows. And, we're not positioned very well because across like South Australia's dry, central New South Wales, pretty dry. Queensland might fluke a rain and things like that, might be able to soak up little cattle, but we need a good drink of rain, and it's heading into the season where we will get one. But hopefully it stirs up soon, because once there's a bit of less pressure climatically, I think that this whole stock job will just roar into gear.
Are we going to get over $10 in winter for lambs? I've heard predictions.
Yeah, I think we will.
Yeah,
I think, but that also depends on how many lambs get sold now. So if it rains next week and people can run their lambs on and feed lambs, there'll be a lot more lambs now. But if we're in a window now, we're on a nice edge of the sound, like in another month, if it doesn't rain, there's going to be a lot of stock dumped.
Yeah, so if it rains now, prices in the short term might go up but level out. But if it doesn't rain, she's
it's different. We go
cheaper
different,
almost, and then dearer later on when there's no stock left.
And when there's no stock left, there'll be a big dump, a big sell off of stock. And cull sheep will be the same, but the pressure will be applied. Yeah, for sure.
So we're only speculating here. For anyone listening to, don't hold us to anything, but it makes sense. It just depends on whether it rains or not. Now, signature question, Morgs. What's something that you've learnt recently that surprised you?
Yeah, I read that when you sent me the link. Something that I've learnt recently that surprised you. I'm a big believer in tradition. I'm a big believer in tradition, and the mountain calf sales is part of that. And everyone, the calendar year that we all seem to in East Gippsland base our lives around, be it calf sales in March and keep your cattle in spring and things like that. People have stuck to that for a reason, and it's pretty true. Like a lot of people say, we sow in mid-March, no matter what or whatever. But I do believe you learn from the best, and you probably copy what they do. Yeah, that's what surprises me, is like that how the methods that people stick to usually work. So if you my advice is stick to the plan, and you should be okay. Yeah, don't lose sleep over it. Very good. Oh, thanks, Morgs, for coming in. We'll be catching up with you next month, same time, same place. Thanks, Al. A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.